Wayne Scraba from Lone Wolf Hot Rods with an update on our sleepy little Nova project. Since a bunch of suspension parts are on back order, I decided to turn my attention to the steering, tack, and gauges, along with the ignition system and other electricals. First up is the steering wheel and column. I swapped the original plastic steering wheel for one of these GM 3-spoke finger grip wheels. I really like them and I've used them on a lot of cars. The original column was reworked. The 3 on the tree bowl was removed, and I replaced it with a floor shift bowl. This allowed me to cleanly add an automated ProComp monster tack to the column. You can see where I wrapped a big stainless steel hose clamp with a long piece of shrink tubing to clean up the install. I also trimmed down the unused end of the clamp. In the engine compartment side, I cut off the shifter mechanism and wired it so that the bowl on the column wouldn't rotate. Next up are the gauges. I really don't like any of the available 2-gauge brackets, so I made my own. You'll note I used a 2 5/8 ProComp mechanical oil pressure gauge and an electric water temperature gauge. The line lock indicator lamp is actually an LED job that I sourced from Aircraft Spruce. I use Aircraft Spruce for a lot of parts. They have plenty of really nice hardware items in their catalog, and the service is fabulous. In the engine compartment, I ran the wires from the temp gauge to the sender location through spiral wrap, and then I covered it with OEM harness tape so that it looks pretty much stock. The oil pressure gauge is plumbed with a -3 AN Earls hose to the firewall. Here it goes to a bulkhead connector where it will eventually hook up with an oil gallery. You can see the connector in the sequence. The location is where a Muncie-equipped car would have a hole for the speedo cable. Since my car was a 3-speed, the hole wasn't there, so it proved to be the perfect spot for the fitting. Something else I did was to clean up the wiring. I removed all unnecessary wiring from the engine harness and then rewrapped it with harness tape. It worked great, and the harness is much simpler. The MSD7AL2 ignition box is mounted on a heavy plastic board. I cut it to more or less match the shape of the heater delete box. That allowed me to mount it on the interior side of the firewall using the same fasteners used to install the heater delete plates. As you can see, I'm not using anything fancy for a coil. I wanted something that would live on the street. Down the road, I'll show you how I routed the coil wire through the firewall. And I'm not using an MSD firewall feed-through setup either. On the engine compartment side, I ran the main MSD power wires right through one of the big rubber push-in fasteners that affix the firewall insulation mat. For wires, I used 10-gauge aircraft wire. It's stiffer than automotive wire, actually has a thinner but higher strength jacket, and the wires are silver-plated to name a few advantages. It's a bit on the pricey side, but I really like this stuff, and if I had to wire a complete car such as a street rod, I'd sure lean towards using this type of wire for everything. Aircraft Spruce is a great source, and they offer all sorts of different gauges and colors of wire. Moving to the back of the car, I swapped out the 2 inner seatbelt bolts for a couple of half-inch coarse, 1 3/4 long grade 8 bolts. The reason? The plan is to hang the exhaust turnouts at this point. I can't run tailpipes because the sway bar link mounts get in the way. As you can see, my Mark Williams built Ultimate 12-bolt has a new home under the Nova. It fits perfectly under the AFCO bias leaf springs. I covered the rear end and axles in another video. This stuff really rocks, and I can't say enough good about it. What doesn't rock is the bolt-on sway bar. The U-bolt brackets are simply junk. They're clearly the finest Chinese grade of steel you can buy. The torque specs call for 35 to 40 foot-pounds per nut on the U-bolts. I was sneaking up to it in the high 20s, and this thing gave away and simply folded up. FYI, I have 4 reliable torque wrenches, 2 high-end Mac tool jobs, an SK clicker, and a beam. I used a 3/8 drive Mac clicker for this job. Triple checked the torque with the SK clicker and the beam. All read high 20s, and this piece folded up like a piece of lead. And hey, never mind, the dog bone links are 3 inches too short with the Nova ride height. The instructions show 2 different dog bone links, and they're both too short. The manufacturer was zero help. I have a solution. I ordered a set of made-in-the-USA sway bar mounts from BMR. They're making new adjustable links from Swedge tubing and high-end Aurora 3-piece rod ends. The rod ends are here, and I'm waiting for the rest of the parts. And finally, the Inspector General arrived to go over my work. This is Teddy, our Shiloh Shepherd. He's 120 or so pounds of rock'em sock'em fun. Teddy is in charge of security around here, along with anything to do with playing ball. He was also a rather huge influence when it came to the Lone Wolf Hot Rods logo. By looking at him, I'm pretty sure you can figure that out. Stay tuned for more updates, and thanks for watching.